In this video, we're going to dive deep into 3 hours of Family Guy lore to fall asleep to, but it's only what-if theories, investigating hypothetical what-if scenarios, alternate realities, and speculative narratives within the Family Guy universe. And our journey into these speculative realities begins with a perilous trip through time, a journey that could have forever marooned our favorite intellectual duo in a past they barely understood. Our journey with Season 7, Episode 3, where a simple party mistake unravels the very fabric of history and begs the question, what if they never made it back? The episode opens, not with the typical chaos, but with a seemingly innocent party at the Griffin house. Balloons adorn the mailbox, and inside, the living room hums with conversation. Lois, Peter, Quagmire, Cleveland, Joe, Bonnie, and Mort Goldman, along with the Griffin children, are all enjoying themselves. A television screen flickers with an Oscars ceremony, showing caricatures of Scarlett Johansson and a rather toothed Steve Buscemi, a brief, absurd distraction before the real plot unfolds. Mort Goldman, ever the nervous guest, eventually finds himself in need of a restroom. In a moment of pure, comedic misunderstanding, he mistakes Stewie's highly advanced time machine for a porta-potty. Can you imagine? A device capable of bending time and space, used as a temporary toilet. Mort steps inside. The machine whirs with blue electrical energy, and in a flash, it vanishes, taking Mort with it. Moments later, Brian enters Stewie's room, only to be confronted by Stewie, who quickly notices the blinking red light on his time machine, a clear sign it's been used. A quick cutaway to Stewie playing with a European-themed See and Say toy subtly hints at their eventual destination, showing he's at least vaguely familiar with European locations. With Mort lost in time, Brian and Stewie embark on a rescue mission. They materialize in a green field, a flash of light marking their arrival. Soon, they're peering through bushes at a quaint European-style town square. A synagogue sign tells them they've landed in Warsaw on September 1st, 1939. The date itself is a chilling historical marker, but it becomes even more poignant when Brian produces a wedding invitation for a Goldman-Stivic wedding on that very day. They find Mort clapping innocently in the pews at his own parents' wedding. The joyous ceremony is abruptly shattered by the German invasion of Poland. Tanks roll, planes fly, and the wedding guests scatter in terror. Brian, Stewie, and Mort take cover, then begin a desperate escape. They flee by car, then by motorcycle with a sidecar, navigating Nazi checkpoints and evading pursuit. One particularly memorable moment sees Stewie on a makeshift skateboard being towed by a Nazi car before rejoining Brian and Mort just as the pursuing vehicle is doused in manure. Their arduous journey continues, a montage showing them walking dirt roads, eventually overlooking a Nazi naval base. They sneak onto a submarine, only to be chased and torpedoed by another, sinking to the ocean floor. Eventually, they resurface near the white cliffs of Dover, witnessing London in ruins from the Blitz. But here's where the what-if truly takes hold. Back at the site where they landed, Stewie kneels by the time machine's return pad, only to discover it's been destroyed. This is the critical moment. What if Stewie, the infant genius, hadn't been able to fix it? What if they were truly stranded, not just temporarily inconvenienced, but permanently trapped in war-torn 1939 Europe? Think about the implications. 3 individuals, 2 of whom are completely out of time, one a baby with advanced technology, another a talking dog, and the third, Mort, a man from the future witnessing his own family's past, all caught in the brutal reality of World War II. Their very presence could have altered history in catastrophic ways, a butterfly effect rippling through every major event. Would they have been captured? Would they have survived the horrors of the war? The very idea of them being stuck there, unable to return to their familiar Quahog, is a truly unsettling thought. However, Stewie's genius prevails. They infiltrate a Nazi laboratory, with Stewie even disguising himself as Adolf Hitler to procure uranium, the crucial component for repairing the time machine. The absurdity of a baby impersonating one of history's most notorious figures is both comedic and deeply disturbing. They even have a bizarre, face-to-face encounter with the real Hitler, a tense moment broken by a rather undignified fart from the dictator. With the uranium in hand, they manage to repair the return pad just as Hitler's guards close in, vanishing in a flash of light. They reappear in Stewie's room, safe, but not entirely. A second Mort, the one from the past, appears briefly before the time machine explodes, a final, dramatic punctuation mark on their perilous journey. The episode leaves us to ponder the sheer luck and ingenuity that saved them. What if Stewie had failed to get the uranium? What if the real Hitler had recognized him? The entire course of their lives, and perhaps the delicate timeline of history itself, hung by a thread. This adventure forces us to consider the fragility of their reality, and how easily their what if could have become a permanent, tragic truth. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button to help the channel grow. Now, let's continue. Stewie's narrow escape from a war-torn past brings us to another pivotal what-if scenario, one that explores the profound impact of Peter Griffin's choices, particularly if he had abandoned his life in Quahog for something entirely different. Our next deep dive takes us to Season 4, Episode 13, an episode that truly makes us wonder what might have happened if Peter had permanently embraced a tribal life, leaving his family and the modern world behind. The episode opens in the familiar Griffin living room with Lois at the piano, singing, and the whole family eventually joining in a grand, synchronized song and dance number, a fleeting moment of harmony before chaos inevitably sets in. We then find Peter, Quagmire, Cleveland, and Joe on the couch, engrossed in a parody of Deadwood, illustrating Peter's usual passivity. Chris enters, visibly anxious about the impending freshman hunt at James Woods Regional High School, a brutal tradition where seniors paddle freshmen. Cleveland and Joe explain the painful ritual, much to Peter's amusement and Chris's terror. Lois, ever the concerned mother, scolds Peter for not taking Chris's fears seriously. This leads to a quick cutaway to a caveman version of Peter and Lois arguing, a primal echo of their modern-day squabbles, establishing a pattern of Peter's escapism when confronted with responsibility. Lois drives Chris to school, honking and waving, almost deliberately drawing the attention of the waiting bullies who immediately chase Chris, paddles in hand. A montage set to Alice Cooper's No More Mr. Nice Guy shows various characters, even Mayor Adam West, gleefully paddling Chris. Meanwhile, Peter is at the unemployment office, struggling to find a job. He's offered a position at the Pawtucket Brewery, but his initial stint is short-lived as he quickly gets drunk and naked, confronting his supervisor in a bizarre display. Back at home, Chris is dejected, and Lois tries to comfort him. Stewie, ever the pragmatist, delivers a monologue about high school, hinting at a future version of himself who's popular. Brian, offering Chris advice, recounts a story about running away to the Peace Corps, inspiring Chris to pack a small suitcase and leave. This sets the stage for our central what if. What if Chris's departure had led Peter to question his own life and seek a permanent escape? Lois finds a letter from Chris, who has joined a South American tribe and found happiness. Peter, initially dismissive, is eventually persuaded to join Lois, Meg, Stewie, and Brian on a private jet to the jungle. They arrive to find Chris, clad only in a loincloth, happily married to a native girl named Loka. The tribal chief introduces his son and cousin, a caricature of Joe Pesci. Lois, naturally, rejects the marriage as illegal, demanding Chris return home. But Chris refuses, content with his new life. This is where Peter's true potential for abandonment emerges. Instead of forcing Chris to return, Peter, pulling out a wallet full of cash, offers it to the chief. The tribe, including Loka, immediately bows down to Peter, declaring him the richest man in the country. Suddenly, Peter is transformed. He lounges in a large hammock, fanned and massaged by native women, smoking a cigar, a king in his own jungle paradise. Lois and Brian are left to manage his newfound wealth, while Stewie, bored by the primitive lifestyle, eventually travels back to Quahog in a strange, repeated cutaway involving Will Ferrell. What if Peter had truly embraced this new life, becoming the permanent, wealthy leader of the tribe, forever abandoning his family in Quahog? He's found a place where his whims are indulged, where he holds power, and where his responsibilities are minimal. Imagine the profound ripple effect. Lois would be left to raise the children alone, perhaps forced to find a new partner, or descend into despair. Meg's already fragile self-esteem would likely plummet further. Chris would remain in the jungle, his family ties severed, and Stewie, without Peter's constant idiocy to react to, might become even more unhinged, or perhaps, strangely, more mature. The entire dynamic of the Griffin household would be shattered. Peter's easy acceptance of this new, indulgent life highlights his inherent desire for escape, a desire that, if unchecked, could have led to a permanent rupture with his established reality. The dream, however, is eventually broken. Chris confronts Peter, accusing him of escaping his problems at home, a mirror to Chris's own escapism from school. This moment of mutual realization is cut short when the tribal chief, yelling, "Freshman," turns the entire tribe hostile, armed with spears and bows. The Griffin family flees through the jungle, escaping on a seaplane, only to realize they've forgotten Meg, who is left floating face down in the river, riddled with arrows. A dark, comedic end to a chaotic adventure. While they do return to Quahog, this episode paints a vivid picture of a what-if, where Peter's escapist tendencies could have led him to a permanent, drastic change of scenery, forever altering the fate of the Griffin family and the very landscape of Quahog. The idea of Peter, the patriarch, choosing a life of tribal indulgence over his family, even if it's played for laughs, holds a deeply unsettling truth about his character. From the wild jungles of South America, we now pivot to a more domestic, yet equally transformative and potentially terrifying impact of Peter Griffin's father, Francis, on the entire family, had Peter fully embraced his strict religious fervor. Our next journey into hypothetical realities brings us to Season 2, Episode 2, an episode that vividly paints a picture of what could have happened if Peter had truly internalized his father's rigid Catholicism, turning the Griffin household into an unrecognizably pious domain. The episode opens with the familiar Family Guy intro, a cheerful, choreographed dance that starkly contrasts with the somber tone that Francis Griffin will soon bring. The real story begins with the family watching television. Peter, ever the remote control tyrant, turns off a dramatic show, then announces his father, Francis, is retiring. He proudly shows a framed picture of the industrial mill where Francis worked, reminiscing about his parents' wedding day, which he humorously recalls involved a "to a Protestant whore" sign on their just-married car. This brief glimpse into Peter's upbringing hints at the complicated relationship he shares with his father, marked by a mix of reverence and resentment. A flashback to a father-son picnic, where a young Peter receives a third-place yellow ribbon tied to a stalk of corn, further illustrates Francis's often harsh and unsupportive parenting style. The family attends Francis's retirement banquet at the Quahog Mariners Banquet Hall, a place now free of that urine smell. Francis, an elderly man with thick gray ear hair, from which two gnomes comically emerge in a cutaway, delivers an angry retirement speech, much to Stewie's delight. The drive home is chaotic, with Peter deliberately crashing the car, though everyone, including Brian, emerges unharmed. The core of our what-if begins to take shape when Francis moves in with the Griffins. Immediately, his strict religious influence becomes apparent. Peter and Lois peek into Stewie's nursery to find Francis sitting by the crib, reading from a large, holy Bible. The next morning, Francis is already up, banging on Chris's door with a rolled-up newspaper, confronting him angrily about his morning habits. He then finds Meg in the sunroom, reading, and begins to lecture her, concluding with an uncomfortable hug. Later, Francis unplugs the television, interrupting Lois and Brian's viewing of a darkly comedic Dick Van Dyke Show parody, declaring it sinful. What if Peter, instead of resisting, had fully embraced his father's stringent religious views? Imagine a household where Francis's every pronouncement became Peter's law. No more television, no more sinful activities, a constant barrage of guilt and judgment. The carefree, often chaotic, but undeniably loving Griffin family dynamic would be utterly destroyed. Chris, already insecure, would likely crumble under the weight of constant moral policing. Meg, perpetually seeking acceptance, might either become entirely submissive to the religious dogma or rebel in a far more destructive way. Lois, the voice of reason, would be caught between her husband and his domineering father, her patience stretched to breaking point. And Stewie, the infant genius, would find his scientific and world domination schemes stifled by an oppressive religious environment, perhaps even turning his intellect towards theological arguments, a truly bizarre prospect. The episode shows glimpses of this potential reality. At a Pawtucket Paw Sox game, Francis scolds Chris for wanting a hot dog, deeming it inappropriate. Peter, in a desperate attempt to gain his father's approval, displays a heartfelt, "Dad, I love you, Peter," message on the scoreboard, but Francis is gone before he can see it. Later, Francis is arrested for causing a disturbance at the Pope's visit to Boston, prompting Peter to bail him out. At the police station, Francis slaps Peter twice for using God's name, once in vain and once in thanks, illustrating his arbitrary and severe interpretations. Peter, still seeking his father's approval, gets Francis a job at Happy-Go-Lucky Toys, Inc., where Francis quickly excels, becoming shop foreman. For a brief moment, they share a tender connection, with Francis telling Peter he loves him, but doesn't like him, a painful truth. But Francis's strictness soon takes over the factory, outlawing various sins and creating a miserable work environment for Peter and his coworkers, who are forced to make Furbies instead of the Zeke the Moody Drifter action figures. Peter eventually confronts Francis, leading to Peter's firing and a comical accusation of sexual harassment. The tension culminates when Francis's wife, Thelma, unexpectedly arrives, sending the entire family and a small rocket-powered pod from the side of the house, fleeing in terror. Peter, desperate to resolve the conflict, devises a plan to bring the Pope to Quahog. He impersonates a priest, drives the Pope mobile through Quahog, and brings the pontiff to his home. The Pope, after kissing Lois's lemony fresh floor and giving Peter advice, agrees to help. They take the Pope to the toy factory, where Francis, upon seeing His Holiness, falls to his knees in reverence. The Pope blesses Francis and tells him he has a fine son. Francis, humbled, admits he was wrong about Peter, but then, in a moment of classic Francis, insults the Pope. After a brief altercation, Francis tearfully tells, the Pope offers Francis a job on his tour, and Francis accepts, finally leaving the Griffin household. This episode, though ending with Francis's departure, serves as a chilling what if about the profound and potentially destructive influence of a zealously religious patriarch. Had Peter fully succumbed to his father's influence, the very essence of the Griffin family, with all its flaws and endearing chaos, would have been irrevocably lost, replaced by a rigid, joyless existence. The playful absurdity of Family Guy would have been extinguished, leaving behind a stark, uncomfortable reality of enforced piety. Having explored the rigid world Francis Griffin might have created, let's now consider a different kind of alternate reality, one where Lois, tired of Peter's antics, chose a dramatically different path, embracing wealth and artistic passion with a former lover. Our next what-if scenario delves into Season 3, Episode 5, an episode that subtly, yet profoundly, explores the alternate path Lois might have taken if she had chosen a life of over Peter's chaotic charm. The episode opens with the family ice skating on a frozen pond, a rare moment of serene winter fun. Brian throws snowballs at Stewie, who retaliates with a comically oversized snowball gun, burying Brian. Peter and Chris race on the ice, Peter declaring himself the winner after skating past a cone, only for a hand to emerge from a hole in the ice, a bizarre, unexplained detail that adds to the show's signature absurdity. Meanwhile, Meg is at James Woods Regional High School, trying out for cheerleading, then for flag girl tryouts, where she stands in line with an eclectic group of girls, including one with a prosthetic leg and another with a full beard. This immediately highlights Meg's perpetual struggle for acceptance and popularity. Peter, oblivious to Meg's struggles, is at the Drunken Clam, playing darts with Joe in Cleveland, and later putting a training bra on Joe, completely engrossed in his usual immature antics. The Griffin family is shown at dinner, Peter and Chris balancing utensils on their faces, while Meg is at school, now a flag girl, trying to fit in with the popular kids. She's seen talking to Neil Goldman, who is smoking a corncob pipe, and then to the popular kids and two jocks. This brief period of belonging is short-lived. During a football game performance, the popular kids set up a prank, launching a bucket of what appears to be guts from a catapult, which lands directly on Meg, eliciting laughter from the crowd. This crushing humiliation is a turning point for Meg, but also a catalyst for Lois's own reflections. What if Lois, witnessing Meg's constant torment and Peter's persistent immaturity, had finally reached her breaking point and pursued a life with someone who offered stability, sophistication, and a shared passion for the arts? The episode plants the seeds for this what if by showing Lois's deep-seated frustrations. Imagine a reality where Lois, after this latest public humiliation of her daughter and Peter's continued obliviousness, decided she'd had enough. She's often the anchor of the family, the one trying to maintain some semblance of order and normalcy. But what if she simply walked away? The show hints at this possibility through Lois's backstory and her occasional yearning for a different life. If she had chosen to leave Peter for a more refined, successful partner, the entire dynamic of the Griffin family would shatter. Peter, left to care for the children, would likely descend into even greater chaos and irresponsibility. Chris would lose his mother's grounding influence. Meg would lose her only advocate. And Stewie, well, Stewie without Lois to both infuriate and occasionally nurture him would be an even more unpredictable force. The Griffin house would become a truly unmanageable, possibly dangerous environment. Lois's departure would not just be a marital separation, it would be the collapse of the family's core structure. The episode continues with Peter and Chris playing basketball, and in a sauna, where Peter is comically shocked by Chris's anatomy. Peter and Lois argue about Chris, highlighting their marital friction. Stewie has a musical fantasy sequence, singing Rocket Man with two clones, a glimpse into his rich inner world, detached from the family's drama. Meg, desperate for acceptance, gives the popular kids a copy of a test, further compromising her integrity. She's tricked into kissing a pig at Connie's Sweet 16 party during 7 Minutes in Heaven, once again becoming the butt of a cruel joke. Crying in the car, she's consoled by Lois, who herself is likely reflecting on her choices. The episode, however, resolves Peter and Chris's storyline first. They go hunting in a snowy forest, confront a large bear, and Chris, surprisingly, scares it away by acting like a TV executive. They then have a heart-to-heart talk, walking away with their arms around each other, a moment of genuine father-son bonding. This resolution for Chris and Peter subtly underscores Lois's ongoing, often thankless role in holding the family together. While Lois ultimately remains with Peter, this episode masterfully lays the groundwork for the unsettling what if of her choosing a different path. The constant indignities faced by Meg, coupled with Peter's persistent immaturity, could easily have driven Lois away. In an alternate reality, Lois's artistic sensibilities, her desire for a more cultured life, and her exhaustion with Peter's antics might have led her to a life of refined comfort and creative fulfillment. but at the cost of the Griffin family as we know it. The subtle tragedy lies in the fact that Lois often sacrifices her own happiness and potential for the sake of her chaotic family, a choice that, in a different timeline, she might have chosen not to make. Having explored Lois's potential flight from Peter's world, we now confront a far more chilling what if. The mass extinction of Quahog's beloved characters, and the narrative void that such a catastrophe would leave behind. Our next unsettling journey takes us to Season 9, Episode 1, a two-part special titled And Then There Were Fewer, which forces us to contemplate the chilling possibility of a mass extinction event for Quahog's beloved characters, and the profound narrative void it would leave behind. The episode begins with a dedication to Perry McFarlane, Seth MacFarlane's mother, before an establishing shot of the Griffin house. Peter, ever the mailman, hands out mail to the family on the couch. Teen People for Meg, Amazing Spider-Man for Chris, and Red Book for Lois. In a typically absurd cutaway, a World War II Army guy appears, receives a letter from his gal, and then departs. Peter then opens a white envelope, revealing an invitation to a gala dinner at Rocky Point Manor, for which he and his family are being honored. Lois, naturally, is confused about why Peter is being honored, but Peter, oblivious, is only interested in the free weekend getaway. Brian, the voice of reason, expresses concern, calling it a scam and fearing being left at the kennel, a place he describes as having no clocks, making an hour feel like 10 years. Stewie, ever blunt, adds that Brian stinks when he comes out. Peter, determined, dismisses their concerns, mispronouncing RSVP and getting his political figures hilariously wrong. The family then sets off in their red station wagon, the scenic drive contrasting sharply with the ominous title card, And Then There Were Fewer. As they drive, Peter, believing everyone else is asleep, indulges in practicing funny voices and characters, from a cattle rustler to a pieman, showcasing his inner desire for creative expression, even if it's just for himself. Chris eventually wakes him, and Lois points out their destination, a massive, dark, Gothic-style manor on an isolated island, accessible only by a single bridge. This dramatic setting immediately evokes classic murder mystery tropes. Upon arrival, other Quahog residents begin to appear. Joe and Bonnie Swanson, Mort and Muriel Goldman, Quagmire with his date Stephanie, Carl the convenience store clerk, news anchors Tom Tucker and Diane Simmons, and Mayor Adam West. Each reveals they received a similar invitation for a dinner in their honor. Even Seamus, the sailor with wooden arms and legs, rows up to the shore. The double doors of the manor's grand, dimly lit foyer close behind them, trapping them inside. Consuela, the maid, greets them, comically misusing Mr. before each name. The guests, now formally dressed, gather in the dining hall. Mayor West, in a humorous cutaway, assures them he's left the city in the capable hands of the Mayor-O-Matic 5000, a robot made of a broom and a faceplate. As they mingle, James Woods enters, introducing his companion, Priscilla. The atmosphere is jovial, but quickly turns deadly. Brian attempts to open a champagne bottle. The cork flies out, hitting Stephanie in the chest. She slumps forward, dead. Everyone screams. Tom Tucker confirms she's been shot. The lights flicker out. A scream is heard, and when they come back on, James Woods is slumped over the table, dead, with a knife in his back. Panic ensues. The group rushes outside, but the front gate is closed, and a lightning strike destroys the bridge, trapping them on the island. Peter crashes his car into Mort's, and the Griffin car nearly falls into the chasm. The remaining guests huddle in the library, realizing they're stuck. Joe, the police officer, attempts to take charge, and they decide to split up to search the house. Peter's attempts to pair people up lead to Brian and Stewie comically refusing to go with Meg, claiming they need to figure out his birthday present. The search quickly yields more horrors. Muriel Goldman is found dead in the dining room, stabbed with the same knife that killed James Woods. Derek is killed in the attic by a Golden Globe Award, and Tom Tucker is found dead with a head wound. The body count rises, creating a palpable sense of dread. This is the central what if of the episode. What if the killer had succeeded in eliminating all of Quahog's most recognizable faces? What if the entire main cast, beyond just the initial victims, had been systematically picked off? Imagine the profound emptiness. The show's vibrant, if dysfunctional ecosystem of characters would be utterly decimated. Quahog, as a setting, would lose its identity. The humor, the heart, the absurdity, all would vanish. The narrative void would be immense, a silent testament to the lives lost. This scenario, even within the confines of a single episode, forces us to confront the mortality of these animated figures and the irreplaceable roles they play in the Family Guy universe. It's a dark contemplation on the very existence of the show itself. The killer is eventually revealed to be Diane Simmons, who, in a series of flashbacks, reveals her motive: revenge on Tom Tucker and James Woods. She confesses her entire plan to Lois, holding her at gunpoint. Peter bursts in, comically oblivious, trying to play his cassette tapes. Diane and Lois struggle on a cliff edge, and just as Diane is about to push Lois off, a shot rings out. Stewie, perched in a tower window with a sniper rifle, declares, "If anybody's gonna take that bitch down, it's gonna be me," as Diane falls to her death. The sun rises, and Lois stands alone on the island as the police arrive. Tom Tucker, who faked his death, is taken away in handcuffs, and the remaining survivors leave the manor. While the main cast ultimately survives, the episode's high body count and the suspenseful premise truly make us ponder the fragility of their existence. It's a grim reminder that in the world of Family Guy, even beloved characters are not immune to the cold, hard reality of a mass extinction event, however temporary. The episode, in its very structure, acts as a chilling what-if laboratory, testing the limits of how many familiar faces can be removed before the narrative itself collapses. Having narrowly avoided a mass casualty event in Quahog, let's now consider a deeply personal what-if scenario. What if Peter Griffin's amnesia had been permanent, forcing him to forge a new identity entirely divorced from his past as a Griffin? Our next exploration into alternate realities brings us to Season 8, Episode 10, an episode that delves into a chilling what if where Peter's amnesia was. The episode begins with the usual Family Guy opening, a vibrant musical number that belies the profound personal crisis that is about to unfold. The Griffin family is in their living room, watching television. A movie in an absurdly wide letterbox format, showing only a sliver of a desert landscape, is interrupted by a news report from Tom Tucker. This mundane start quickly leads to the pivotal event. The family attends auditions for Family Feud at the Quahog Civic Center. Peter, with his usual unfiltered enthusiasm, tells an embarrassing story about Lois giving birth to Chris, much to Lois's dismay. The producers, however, are delighted by the Griffins' dysfunctional charm and select them. On the Family Feud set, facing off against the Callahan family, Peter's unpredictable nature shines. During the first round, name something you put in a sink, Peter gives the shocking answer, fetus in the toilet bowl, which, to everyone's surprise, is a top answer. Lois, in a bizarre moment, gives host Richard Dawson a long, open-mouthed kiss, then licks his entire face. Meg's answer, a razor blade and a note, is a grim strike, but Chris saves the round with me masturbating, which is the #1 answer, teenager masturbating. The Griffins win the round, then proceed to the fast money bonus round. Here's where the what if truly takes root. In the fast money round, Lois scores 199 points, leaving Peter with an easy target of 1 point to win. However, Peter, in a moment of pure, unadulterated Peterness, repeatedly gives the same answer. Chair. He fails to score any points, gets angry, and attacks Richard Dawson, pushing him, causing Peter to fall and break the podium. Lying amidst the wreckage, Peter sits up, dazed, and asks, "Who am I?" He has amnesia. What if this amnesia had been truly permanent? What if Peter Griffin, the husband, father, and central figure of the show, had never regained his memory? The episode itself acknowledges the trope with a fourth wall-breaking black screen that comments on the amnesia storyline. But beyond the comedic device, consider the profound and tragic implications. Lois would be left with a husband who didn't know her, who couldn't remember their life together, their children, or their shared history. She would essentially be a widow with a living, breathing stranger in her house. The family's initial attempts to jog Peter's memory are heartbreakingly futile. Dr. Hartman confirms the amnesia. Lois tries to reintroduce Peter to his own children. Chris, thinking he's invisible, strips naked and presses his backside against the window, a desperate and misguided attempt to get a reaction. Peter instinctively says, "Doe!" upon seeing Meg, a reference to another animated patriarch, but is told it's not his catchphrase. Stewie and Brian, in a moment of dark humor, even whisper about choosing new names for themselves, highlighting the potential for a complete reset of their identities in Peter's new world. Lois shows Peter a video of their honeymoon, a parody of a Corona commercial, hoping to spark recognition. Peter, watching himself get drunk and fall over, becomes flustered and giggly, telling Brian he thinks Lois likes him, reducing their deep marital bond to a naive crush. He then walks in with a boombox, playing Surfin' Bird and dancing enthusiastically, a new, untethered Peter emerging. Lois tries to teach him basic life skills, using a cordless phone, leading to a confusing call with Carter Pewterschmidt, who mistakes Peter for his drug dealer, and how to use a knife and fork. Peter's attempts at driving in Grand Theft Auto quickly devolve into carjacking and violence, showing a dark, uninhibited side of his new persona. The trauma extends to the children. Stewie is utterly traumatized after Peter changes his diaper, describing it in horrifying detail to Brian. At the Drunken Clam, Peter's friends try to explain their usual routine, and Peter, without his moral compass, promptly pulls down a waitress's top. In the bedroom, Peter brings another woman, Tiffany, from Saved by the Bell, to bed with Lois, completely oblivious to the concept of marriage or fidelity. This is the moment Lois declares she's leaving, moving with the children to a run-down apartment, a world away from their comfortable Quahog home. The Griffin house becomes a wild party pad, with Peter at the center of the chaos, oblivious to his family's suffering. In this permanent amnesia, what if Peter would effectively be a new person, a blank slate, but one still prone to his baser instincts? The family would be fractured, forced to adapt to a life without the Peter they knew, a life of poverty and emotional instability. Lois would likely find herself in a relationship with Quagmire, who attempts to seduce her, highlighting the desperation of her situation. The show, as we know it, would cease to exist, replaced by a darker, more melancholic narrative about a family struggling to survive after the core of their identity has vanished. However, the show, in its typical fashion, provides a comedic resolution. Brian eventually confronts Peter, revealing that his memory returned when the giant chicken hit him with a shovel. Peter admits he faked his continued amnesia to enjoy the bachelor life. Realizing Lois is with Quagmire, Peter rushes to Quagmire's house, finding Lois in bed with him. Quagmire, in a moment of surprising integrity, realizes he can't betray Peter's trust and loses his erection. Peter and Lois reunite, embracing, while Quagmire's penis comically inflates and explodes from a pump, a final absurd detail. Despite the comedic resolution, the episode powerfully illustrates the profound implications of Peter's potential permanent amnesia. It serves as a stark reminder of how essential Peter, with all his flaws, is to the fabric of the Griffin family, and how his absence, or rather, his unknowing of them, would have truly shattered their world, forcing them into an entirely new and much bleaker existence. Our journey continues with Season 12, Episode 6, an episode that sent shockwaves through the fandom by depicting the controversial and tragic death of Brian, forcing viewers to confront questions of character mortality and the show's willingness to manipulate audience emotions. The episode opens with the cheerful Family Guy theme song, which, in hindsight, serves as a poignant contrast to the sadness that is about to unfold. The narrative immediately plunges us into a high-stakes action sequence. Brian and Stewie are seen running from Native Americans in jeeps, who are firing rifles at them. They are cornered on a bridge, and Brian, in a desperate move, pushes Stewie over the side, jumping in after him to escape. They manage to get out of the water, dirty and scratched, only to encounter more modernly dressed Native Americans. This opening sequence, full of danger and pursuit, highlights the close bond between Brian and Stewie and their reliance on each other for survival. Stewie reveals that his time machine's return pad is broken and sparking, leaving them stranded in what appears to be a Native American-dominated alternate timeline. They hide behind a dumpster in an alley, observing a city populated entirely by Native Americans. A humorous cutaway shows a crowd of Native Americans rushing into a small store selling jean jackets after a larger store of the same kind opens, a satirical commentary on cultural trends. Brian and Stewie then sneak into a teepee-style house, which is a Native American version of the Griffin home, complete with an alternate Griffin family. Inside this alternate Stewie's room, they find a wooden, Native American-style time machine. Stewie picks up a wooden return pad, and they activate the machine, traveling back in time. They witness their past selves. Past Stewie is giving guns to Native Americans in front of teepees, implying he was responsible for arming them and creating this alternate timeline. And past Brian is seen flirting with a Native American woman. Stewie confronts Brian about this, a moment of lighthearted banter amidst their desperate situation. Present Stewie then drops the return pad, accidentally transporting them back to the original timeline, just as past Stewie is about to give the guns. Present Stewie takes the guns back, and they are transported away as the Native Americans start shooting arrows at them. This complex temporal paradox highlights Stewie's brilliance and recklessness, showing how his inventions often lead to unintended consequences. Back in the original timeline, in Stewie's room, he is at his small table with a laptop, running a search. Later, Brian walks down the hallway and hears a noise from Stewie's room. He enters to find the time machine completely dismantled and destroyed. Stewie explains he's getting rid of it, much to Brian's shock. Brian tries to talk him out of it, but Stewie is firm, citing his purchase of a toy at Christmas as a reason to destroy it. This decision to dismantle the time machine is pivotal, as it removes the very mechanism that could save them from future dilemmas, or in this case, a past mistake. Brian and Stewie go to a junkyard, where the dismantled time machine is placed on a conveyor belt and crushed. They stand in the junkyard, looking sad, marking the end of an era for their adventures. A red street hockey net lands in the junkyard, and Brian suggests they take it and play. Stewie, still sad, eventually agrees, as they walk home with the hockey net and sticks. The mood is somber, tinged with a fragile hope for new, simpler pastimes. The tragic moment strikes when they set up the net on the street. Stewie runs back into the house, and a silver car speeds down the street and hits Brian. Stewie watches in horror. The Griffin family runs out of the house to find Brian mangled and bleeding on the street. A squirrel runs up to Brian, kicks him, and runs away, a darkly comedic and almost cruel touch to the tragic scene. At the Quahog veterinary clinic, the family sits in the waiting room, looking worried. Dr. Hartman, looking grim, tells them that Brian's injuries are too severe. The family reacts in shock and sadness. They are led into the operating room, where Brian lies on the table, heavily bandaged and bleeding. In a heartbreaking scene, Brian says his last words to the family, telling them he loves them, before the heart monitor flatlines. The family cries over Brian's body, and the vet confirms his death. The scene fades to black, with the family holding each other and crying, a truly devastating moment for the series. The aftermath is equally sorrowful. The family returns home, looking sad. Stewie, in a fit of anger and grief, breaks his hockey stick and throws the net in the trash. He then has a moment of realization, but it's too late. A man, Neil Goldman, pulls up in a car and takes the hockey net from the trash. At Brian's funeral in a cemetery, many characters are in attendance. Lois gives a eulogy, and Mayor Adam West briefly appears and complains that no one came to his funeral before fading away, a surreal moment of meta-humor. Peter gives a tearful eulogy, confessing his love for Brian and comforting Lois. Stewie cries and drops a rose into the open grave as the family watches it being filled. Back at home, the family is eating breakfast, still grieving. Lois suggests getting a new dog, and Peter makes a Ghostbusters joke about getting Brian back. The family agrees to look for a new dog, much to Stewie's anger. At Quahog Pets, the family looks at rows of caged dogs. Peter finds a new dog, Vinny, who speaks to him from his cage. Vinny, an Italian-American dog, quickly bonds with Peter, who opens the cage for him. Vinny, describing himself as a pussy hound. From the profound grief of Brian's temporary loss, we now shift our focus to a different kind of companionship, one that exists in the vibrant imagination of Stewie Griffin. Let's ponder a hypothetical where his cherished teddy bear, Rupert, was a real, sentient companion, altering the very nature of his closest bond. Our next imaginative leap takes us to Season 5, Episode 9, an episode that makes us speculate on a world where Stewie's, fundamentally. The episode opens with a Road to Rupert style credit sequence, featuring Brian and Stewie in various absurd vignettes, setting a tone for their often surreal adventures. The story begins at a Griffin yard sale. Lois complains to Brian about a DVD ripoff, Stymie Gruffin, The Untold Story, before she's comically dragged off screen by two men in black suits. A man then approaches Brian and buys Stewie's teddy bear, Rupert, for $1. Stewie appears, immediately realizing Rupert is missing. He panics, shouting Rupert's name and imagining grim scenarios, including a parody of Spock's funeral from Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, where he gives a eulogy for Rupert on a Starship Enterprise-like bridge, and Brian plays Amazing Grace on bagpipes. What if Rupert was truly alive? What if Stewie's unwavering belief and deep emotional connection to his teddy bear were not just a figment of his imagination, but a shared reality? Imagine a Rupert who could talk, move, and interact with the world beyond Stewie's mind. The entire dynamic of Stewie's life would change. His closest confidant wouldn't just be an inanimate object through which he projects his thoughts, but an actual, sentient being. This would fundamentally alter his relationship with Brian, who often serves as Stewie's sounding board and accomplice. Rupert, as a real entity, might offer different advice, challenge Stewie in new ways, or even develop his own personality and desires, potentially leading to conflicts with Stewie or the family. The line between Stewie's inner world and external reality would blur, creating a truly unique and potentially unsettling dynamic within the Griffin household. Meanwhile, Peter is engrossed in his own antics. He finds a pair of Evel Knievel-style gloves, buys them from Brian, and attempts to jump a line of parked cars in the family station wagon. The stunt, predictably, results in a fiery pileup, though Peter emerges unscathed. Joe Swanson arrives to revoke Peter's license, leading to a comical struggle, and Peter collapsing in pain. Bored without his license, Peter mopes on the couch, watches a parody of Cheers, punches the television, and decides to create his own sitcom in his head, leading to a full 1980s-style opening sequence for My Black Son, starring Peter Griffin and Emmanuel Lewis. Back to our main storyline. Stewie, dazed and surrounded by a spilled bottle of NyQuil, drunkenly calls for what he thinks is a cat, but is actually a throw pillow, before breaking down crying. Brian, feeling guilty, takes Stewie to a toy store to get a replacement bear. Stewie, furious, refuses and attacks Brian, who confesses he accidentally sold Rupert at the yard sale. Stewie, heartbroken and enraged, collapses, sobbing, then angrily berates Brian. Lois, dealing with Peter's antics, appoints Meg as Peter's personal driver, a role Peter finds disgusting, though Lois points out the alternative was the evil monkey. The focus, however, remains on Stewie's quest. He uses DNA from the dollar bill Rupert was sold for to find his new owner, located in Aspen, Colorado. Brian and Stewie hitchhike, embarking on a cross-country journey. They attempt to rent a helicopter, but it's too expensive. Stewie, ever resourceful, notices the rental agreement accepts a jaunty tune. This leads to a spectacular musical sequence where Stewie and Brian perform a song and dance number, with Stewie rotoscoped into a dance scene with Gene Kelly from Anchors Away. Impressed, the rental agent gives them the helicopter. They fly through the mountains, but Stewie's comment about the colors of the mountains and sky distracts Brian, causing them to crash, sending them tumbling down a snowy slope. Exhausted, they finally reach Aspen. In Aspen, they find Rupert's new owner, a man with a little boy who is now holding the bear. The man refuses to give Rupert back. Stewie, noticing the man's skiing trophies, challenges him to a ski-off. Rupert for Brian. The man agrees. The episode also features a montage of Peter and Meg spending quality time together, smashing mailboxes, and going to a drive-in, culminating in Peter acknowledging he has a really wonderful daughter. This brief, heartwarming subplot serves as a counterpoint to Stewie's desperate quest. The episode concludes with the ski race, the climax where Stewie and Brian compete to get Rupert back. Ultimately, they win, and Rupert is returned to Stewie. But the what if of Rupert's sentience lingers. If Rupert were truly alive, this entire arduous journey might have been different. Rupert might have communicated his distress, or even found his way back to Stewie himself. Their bond, already strong in Stewie's mind, would be externalized, a tangible companionship that could offer Stewie a different kind of stability, or, conversely, introduce new complexities and challenges to his already unique existence. The episode, by showing the depth of Stewie's attachment, inadvertently highlights the profound shift that would occur if his beloved teddy bear were anything more than a cherished, silent confidant. Our journey continues with Season 4, Episode 4, an episode that brutally dissects Meg's desperate pursuit of acceptance, exposing the relentless cruelty she endures and her deep-seated insecurities, often leading her to extreme and self-destructive measures. Opening credits, a cheerful facade before delving into Meg's often tragic reality. The narrative opens at James Woods Regional High School, where Meg and her friends admire a boy named Craig Hoffman, who they see as a rebel. In a bizarre fantasy sequence, Meg imagines a picnic with a dead body by train tracks, where a wolf drags the body's leg away, and Meg remarks, "You're so good with animals." This disturbing fantasy immediately signals Meg's deeply troubled psyche and her unconventional desires for connection. When she approaches Craig and asks him out, he cruelly rejects her, saying, "I don't go out with dudes." Distraught, Meg returns home and asks her parents if she is ugly. Peter, with his characteristic insensitivity, replies, "Well, he's a sharp kid, you might be ugly," causing Meg to cry and run away. Stewie, observing her suffering, chillingly remarks, "Yes, yes, your anguish sustains me," further emphasizing the pervasive cruelty she faces even within her own family. Lois tries to comfort Meg, offering to take her shopping for new clothes, including lowrider jeans. Stewie, however, imagines Meg in lowrider jeans and is so disgusted that he repeatedly beats the thought bubble with a rolling pin until it dissipates, a visual representation of his contempt for her. Meanwhile, Peter and his friends discover that the Drunken Clam Bar is for sale, threatened by a new megamall. They decide to help Horace, the bar owner, renovate the bar. Their attempt at a 1980s-style renovation montage is a chaotic disaster, resulting in a colorful, broken mess and a haywire robot. Quagmire accurately sums it up. "Wow, I think we made it worse." This subplot, while comedic, highlights Peter's impulsive nature and his tendency to create more problems than he solves. Back at the Mega Mall, Lois and Meg go clothes shopping. Brian and Stewie wander through the mall, with Stewie complaining about the danger and climbing onto Brian's back, quoting Yoda. In a clothing store, when Lois touches a saleswoman, the woman screams, pours a carton on her head, sets herself on fire, and runs through the store, a bizarre and unexplained moment of extreme reaction. Stewie, in a shocking act, makes a bet with Brian, takes off his clothes, and runs through the mall naked, shouting, "Help! I've escaped from Kevin Spacey's basement." This outburst is both deeply disturbing and a meta-reference, showcasing Stewie's unpredictable and often dark humor. Lois and Meg, dejected, pass a TV screen with a news broadcast announcing a makeover segment at the mall with reporter Trisha Takanawa. Lois enthusiastically volunteers Meg for the makeover. The cameraman, who looks identical to the saleswoman who set herself on fire, also sets himself on fire and runs away. Trisha, unfazed, declares Meg the winner. Meg, now with blonde hair and a stylish outfit, returns home. Peter, initially mistaking her for a woman from his past, laughs uncontrollably before welcoming her to the family. This moment, while seemingly positive, is unsettling, as it suggests that Meg's acceptance is conditional on her physical transformation. Her popularity soars at school. Craig Hoffman, who previously rejected her, now approaches her and asks her out. The popular girls, led by Connie D'Amico, also invite her to hang out. Meg's extreme makeover has, on the surface, given her the acceptance she craved. Peter and his friends, having failed to renovate the Drunken Clam, decide to form a rock band. Their first gig is at the Rhode Island State Penitentiary, where the warden introduces them as Fat, Horny, Black, and Joe. They realize they don't know any songs, and the angry prisoners start throwing things. The rest of the Griffin family arrives to help, and the full family, dressed in matching orange and yellow outfits, performs a pop song. The prisoners and guards love it. And a man identifying himself as Jimmy Iovine offers them a record deal. A montage shows the family's rise to fame as Meg and the Griffins. On the tour bus, a music producer, Dr. Diddy, suggests naming the band Meg and focusing on her sex appeal. Peter agrees, despite Lois's concerns, and Meg asserts her desire to be exploited. This is a truly dark turn, as Meg, desperate for attention, willingly embraces objectification. Lois worries about Meg's new attitude, but Peter dismisses her concerns. They are scheduled to perform on Saturday Night Live. In the green room, Peter and Lois watch the opening, which turns out to be a video of Meg and Jimmy Fallon having sex. Meg returns to the green room, crying, realizing she was used. Peter becomes enraged and goes on stage during Jimmy Fallon's monologue, beating him up and yelling, "This is for laughing and looking at the camera during every sketch you've ever been in." The family returns home, and Meg is back to her old self, glad to be the real me again. The scene then pulls back to reveal the living room is a set on a stage, and the family, along with all the characters from the episode, takes a bow in front of a live audience. Brian, alone on the couch, watches Showtime at the Apollo on TV and turns it off, denying it's because it's a black show, a moment of meta-commentary on the show's own racial humor. This episode is a devastating portrayal of Meg's constant struggle for self-worth and acceptance. Her willingness to undergo extreme physical changes and even embrace exploitation highlights the profound psychological damage inflicted by years of abuse and rejection. The cruel rejection from Craig, Peter's insensitive comments, and the ultimate betrayal by Jimmy Fallon all contribute to a narrative of relentless suffering for Meg. Her brief moment of popularity is hollow, built on superficiality, and ultimately leading to further trauma. The episode satirizes the entertainment industry's exploitation of young women. Our journey continues with Season 7, Episode 5, an episode that offers a dark commentary on aging, self-loathing, and the pursuit of superficial validation as Brian grapples with feeling old and replaceable. The episode opens with the standard Family Guy animated sequence, a cheerful introduction that soon gives way to Brian's existential crisis. The narrative begins with Peter, Quagmire, Cleveland, Joe, and Brian watching a Jackass parody on TV where Johnny Knoxville gets shot in the face. The friends laugh hysterically, and Peter gets an idea to perform similar stunts at home. This sets a tone of reckless behavior and disregard for safety that will have consequences for Brian. Lois discovers Peter, Quagmire, and Cleveland on the roof of the house, preparing to push Peter in a shopping cart off the roof. Peter introduces the stunt, is pushed off, and lands in the front yard with a horribly contorted and lumpy spine. He panics, and then projectile vomits onto Brian, who is watching in horror from the driveway. This grotesque display of Peter's stupidity and injury foreshadows the physical toll that dangerous stunts can take. In another stunt, a naked Quagmire stands outside with honey smeared on his crotch as Cleveland opens beehives, unleashing a swarm of bees. Peter antagonizes the bees, leading to them angrily swarming and stinging Quagmire all over his body as he screams in pain. Joe then shaves a large strip down the back of Brian's head with hair clippers, causing Brian to yelp in pain. These escalating acts of self-inflicted harm and casual cruelty highlight the friends' recklessness and their willingness to inflict pain on each other for amusement. The climax of these stunts involves Peter, dressed as the greatest American hero in a red superhero costume, roller skates, and a blonde wig, being pulled by the family's station wagon. He flies off a wooden ramp, crashes into a tall pine tree, and falls into a lake, clearly injured and calling for help. Brian, with a bandage on his head from being shaved, jumps into the water to save him, followed by Joe in his wheelchair. Back in the living room, Peter sits with his arm in a sling and scratches on his face. Lois scolds him for endangering Brian, emphasizing Brian's age in human years. This seemingly innocuous comment about Brian's age triggers an existential crisis in him. Peter becomes fixated on the idea that Brian is old. He attempts to act young to relate to Brian, using slang and wearing a futuristic helmet, but Brian is unimpressed. Peter then changes his appearance to that of a preppy 1980s movie bully, complete with a popped collar and blonde wig, and antagonizes Brian, further highlighting his own immaturity and insensitivity. The episode then takes a dark turn when Peter, after a montage parodying The Incredible Hulk, where he walks sadly down a street, enters the kitchen and introduces new Brian, a gray fluffy dog with a red bandana. The family is initially shocked, but then enthusiastically welcomes the new dog, much to Brian's horror. A lengthy montage then unfolds, showing new Brian being a perfect, overly positive, and talented dog. He wakes Peter and Lois by playing a flute, bakes for the family, sings karaoke with Lois, and plays guitar. Brian, feeling completely replaced and irrelevant, leaves the Griffin house with his luggage. He attempts to stay with Quagmire and then Cleveland, but finds both living situations unbearable, underscoring his displacement and the cold reality of his friends' lives. He ultimately says a tearful goodbye to the family and leaves for good, believing he has no place with them. This montage is particularly unsettling, as it shows how easily Brian is supplanted by a younger, more perfect version, a commentary on the disposable nature of individuals in a youth-obsessed culture. However, Brian, standing outside, decides to go back. He shows the family old home movies of himself as a cute puppy, reminding them of their bond. The family gets emotional and welcomes him back, momentarily rejecting new Brian. But as they celebrate Brian's return, new Brian, sleeping on the floor, farts. Peter, mistakenly thinking it was Brian, gets angry and, in a moment of shocking casual cruelty, kicks Brian out of the house again, referencing Old Yeller and intending to put him down with a shotgun. Brian sits sadly on the front porch with Stewie. Stewie intervenes, explaining that new Brian was the one who actually farted. This revelation saves Brian, but the quickness with which Peter was willing to put down his longtime companion is deeply disturbing, highlighting his callousness and lack of genuine affection. The family, including New Brian, has a karaoke night. Peter and New Brian sing, and the family laughs and enjoys it, while Stewie looks annoyed. The true darkness of New Brian's character is then revealed when Stewie confronts him. New Brian nonchalantly admits to humping Stewie's beloved teddy bear, Rupert. Stewie is enraged. The scene cuts to Stewie dragging a large, heavy trash bag with a blood trail out to the curb, strongly implying that Stewie has murdered New Brian. In the living room, Peter reads New Brian's supposed suicide note to the family. They are momentarily sad, but Peter quickly gets over it and introduces a new pet hamster named Bernie, demonstrating the Griffin family's disturbing ability to move on from tragedy with alarming speed. The final shot is of a heartbroken Stewie in the shower, sadly washing his teddy bear, Rupert, as water falls on them. This poignant image underscores the emotional trauma Stewie has endured. The tragic tale of Brian's temporary replacement and Stewie's subsequent grief leads us to a more mundane, yet equally transformative, what-if scenario involving Peter and his friends. Let's consider the grim possibility of them facing a much longer, harsher sentence in prison, and the profound transformation it would entail. Our next journey into hypothetical realities takes us to Season 10, Episode 8, an episode that makes us consider the grim what-if of Peter and his friends' transformation it would entail. Song that quickly gives way to the mundane realities of adult life. The story begins at the Drunken Clam, where Peter, Quagmire, Cleveland, and Joe are drinking beer. Peter, annoyed by Lois giving him chores, fakes a bad signal on his flip phone and pretends to be someone named Mike. Lois, surprisingly, is impressed. Peter complains to his friends about Lois's demands, prompting Joe to complain about Bonnie's impossible tasks, including vacuuming tire tracks from his wheelchair off the carpet. Quagmire laments his depressing, empty fridge, and Cleveland complains about his wife, Donna. Peter laments their loss of freedom, and Joe talks about his dull life, finding excitement only in wheelchair porn. Quagmire, seeking adventure, suggests a road trip to reclaim their freedom. They all enthusiastically agree. Peter, Cleveland, Joe, and Quagmire announce their plan to go on a road trip to New Orleans to their wives, who are surprisingly okay with it. The men fantasize about throwing Mardi Gras beads from balconies. They set off in a blue car, driving through Georgia, passing a sinister sign that reads, "Now entering Georgia. If you can read this, we gonna get you." Inside the car, they play Would You Rather. A brown police car appears in their rearview mirror, pulling them over. Peter, now wearing a red Harvard sweater and smoking a pipe, attempts to talk down to the Southern sheriff, but the unimpressed officer smashes their headlight, windshield, and Joe's window with his nightstick. Joe tries to reason with the sheriff, showing his own police badge, but the sheriff throws it away and then plants a bag of marijuana in their trunk. Peter, comically, expresses excitement about the drugs, leading to their immediate arrest. The men are transported on a prison bus, wearing gray prison uniforms and shackles, to Dungaree's County Work Camp. In a cutaway, their jury is hilariously revealed to be composed of the Simpsons characters. At the work camp, the warden gives them a stern speech, and Peter's sarcastic comment earns him a rifle butt to the stomach. They are put on a chain gang, breaking rocks. The black prisoners sing a traditional work song, while Peter suggests the white men sing their own, leading to a peppy rendition of The Company Way from How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. The next day, working in the fields, a mailman delivers a package to Peter containing a jetpack. Peter, still chained to the others, straps it on and attempts to fly away, yanking them all off their feet and crashing. In the barracks that night, the warden informs them their sentences have been extended by 30 days. Another prisoner reveals the grim truth. Once you're at this camp, you never leave, stating he's been there for 45 years. Peter, panicking, declares he's going to find the biggest guy in prison and beat him up, then realizes he is the biggest guy and comically stabs himself. Here's the grim what if. What if this revelation, that they might never leave, had been true? What if Peter, Cleveland, Joe, and Quagmire were truly stuck in Dungarees County work camp for years, or even decades? Imagine the profound transformation this would entail. Their lives as they knew them in Quahog would be completely eradicated. Peter, stripped of his comforts and family, would either completely break down or perhaps develop a surprising resilience. His usual antics would be replaced by the harsh realities of prison life. Cleveland, normally mild-mannered, might find a hidden strength or descend into quiet despair. Joe, the police officer, would have his sense of justice and authority shattered, forced to live as an inmate. Quagmire, the womanizer, would be cut off from his primary pursuit, a fate almost worse than death for him. Their wives, Lois, Donna, and Bonnie, would be left to cope with their husband's permanent absence. Lois, who already considered leaving Peter in a previous what-if scenario, might move on, perhaps even finding a new partner. The children would grow up without their fathers, forever shaped by this traumatic loss. The show would become a stark drama of endurance and the slow erosion of hope, a far cry from its usual comedic tone. The Dungarees County Work Camp would become a permanent, brutal reality, transforming them from irresponsible friends into hardened, broken men. The episode, however, provides a comedic escape. Back at the Griffin house, Lois, Donna, and Bonnie, drunk, forcibly dress Brian in a bumblebee costume, much to Stewie's annoyance. Meanwhile, the men in the work camp discover a small, wooden house. Quagmire finds a set of handcuff and shackle keys, freeing them. They realize the house is filled with pictures of the sheriff. They hide in a closet as the sheriff enters, farts loudly, and begins talking to his wife, who he believes is in the closet. Peter, pretending to be the wife, coaxes him into a tender moment, asking for a kiss. The men burst out, revealing the trick. The enraged sheriff starts shooting at them as they flee. They escape by jumping onto a moving freight train, cheering in victory from an open boxcar. They decide to hop off at the next fast food restaurant. They arrive back in Quahog at a train yard, only to be immediately surrounded by Joe's police force and the Southern Sheriff's deputies, all pointing their guns at them. Joe, in a surprising turn, confronts the sheriff, lecturing him on law enforcement ethics. The Southern deputies, moved by Joe's speech, carry their wounded sheriff back to their cars and drive away. Mayor West taunts them as he rides by on a bicycle. Back in the Griffin living room, Peter, still in his dirty prison uniform, reflects on his adventure and delivers an unintelligible moral, causing the family to burst into laughter. While the episode ends with their return to normalcy, the brief glimpse into the Dungarees County Work Camp and the prisoner's grim declaration offers a powerful what-if about the transformative and potentially devastating impact of prolonged incarceration on Peter and his friends. It's a reminder that even in a cartoon, the loss of freedom can utterly reshape a character's destiny. The unsettling thought of a new and improved Brian gives way to a more grounded, yet equally transformative what-if scenario for the original Brian. Let's explore an alternate career path for him as a dedicated police K-9, and how this devotion to law enforcement would reshape his life. Our next dive into hypothetical realities takes us to Season 3, Episode 1, an episode that makes us explore an alternate career path for Brian. The episode begins with the cheerful Family Guy intro, a stark contrast to Brian's personal struggles that are about to unfold. The story opens with Brian confiding in his therapist, Dr. Bruce, about being in a rut, feeling nothing thrills him anymore. He pathetically admits to having watched the Behind the Music episode with Leif Garrett 18 times. Dr. Bruce suggests volunteer work to become less inwardly focused. Brian, intrigued, sits up, but an awkward exchange about Dr. Bruce's daughter, the receptionist, ends the session early. Meanwhile, Peter is at the Happy-Go-Lucky Toys Company picnic. His boss, Mr. Weed, announces a company picnic, offering a week's paid vacation as a prize for the last one standing in a tranquilizer dart hunt. Peter, ever the glutton for absurd spectacle, eagerly anticipates the catch the greased up deaf guy event, a chaotic chase that results in Peter slipping and the deaf guy running into the woods. The Tranquility Dart hunt begins, and Peter, after being shot in the butt, eventually succumbs, winning the vacation. Here's the central what if. What if Brian, seeking purpose and a new direction, had fully committed to a career as a police K-9? The episode, though it eventually pulls him back, deeply explores this possibility. Imagine Brian, with his intelligence and keen senses, dedicating himself to law enforcement. His cynical, intellectual nature would be put to a rigorous test, potentially transforming him into a hardened, disciplined officer. His close bond with Stewie might be strained by his new duties, and his artistic aspirations could be entirely abandoned in favor of a life of public service. The very essence of Brian's character, as the family's intellectual and moral compass, would be reshaped by the demands of police work. The episode shows Brian's initial foray into this world. He's seen guiding a blind man, walking him directly into a movie theater ticket booth, then describing a boring movie to him. Later, walking down a suburban street, he encounters Joe Swanson, who, impressed by Brian's nose, suggests he join the police force. Brian, intrigued, sniffs Quagmire at the airport, accurately deducing his recent activities in Manila, including having made love to 2 Filipino women and a man. This display of heightened senses impresses Joe, who declares Brian a natural. Brian's first bust is a success. He sniffs out cocaine at the airport, chasing down a man with a briefcase, and then, in a moment of comedic indulgence, licks the white powder off the floor, getting a rush. He's praised as a hero, and his senses become even sharper. He deduces Lois's toast is ready, Meg's new conditioner, and even when Stewie needs a diaper change. His newfound success and sense of purpose are palpable. The family, despite Brian's growing dedication, remains focused on their own lives, planning a cruise to the Bahamas. Stewie, in a musical number parodying HMS Pinafore, sings about being the greatest captain of the Queen's Navy, a stark contrast to Brian's grounded reality. Brian's police work takes a darker turn. He bursts into a Sunday school class, claiming it's a drug bust. Joe tries to intervene, but Brian, sniffing the chalkboard, insists it's pure Bogota bullion. He rips a poster of Jesus off the wall, revealing a hidden room where midgets are processing drugs. Joe and Brian engage in a chaotic fight with the midgets, throwing them around the classroom. The arrested midgets are taken to the Quahog police station for mugshots, and Brian is showered with praise. Joe, however, notes that Brian is looking gaunt and jittery, and he comes home smoking, high on cocaine. This is the critical juncture for our what if. What if Brian's addiction had spiraled, and his dedication to police work had become a destructive obsession, fueled by the rush of drug busts and the drugs themselves? The police K-9 path, initially a source of purpose, could have become a path to self-destruction. His moral compass, once a guiding force, would be completely compromised. He would embody the tragic archetype of the corrupted officer, losing himself in the very world he sought to police. Lois, concerned, notes Brian's weight loss. Brian, high on cocaine, launches into an aggressive, paranoid rant about his day, insulting the family and bringing home a prostitute named Tina. He then leaves with Tina, knocking over a picture frame, signifying a complete break from his family. The family, along with Dr. Bruce, stages an intervention. Brian, in therapy, argues with a counselor who identifies Peter as a negative influence. Brian, however, defends Peter, claiming he treated him like family. He declares his therapy complete and leaves, stating, "We're all responsible for our own destiny." But then, in a shocking twist, "And that's why I'm leaving." He gets into a taxi, bound for the airport, as Stewie cries and spits on the ground in disgust. The episode ends with a "to be continued." While the episode sets up a continuation, the what if of Brian fully embracing the K-9 life, with all its potential for self-destruction, is powerfully explored. His addiction and subsequent abandonment of his family paint a grim picture of a life consumed by a dangerous, all-encompassing career. Had he truly left, the Griffin family would have lost their intellectual and emotional anchor, replaced by a phantom of his former self, a casualty of a life he sought to control, but ultimately succumbed to. From Brian's potential life as a police K-9, we now shift to a profoundly different kind of transformation, one that would irrevocably alter Peter Griffin's perception of the world: the permanent consequences of his blindness, forcing the family to navigate a reality where his primary sense was irrevocably lost. 4. Episode 3. An episode that makes us investigate the permanent consequences of Peter's blindness, forcing the family to navigate a world where his primary sense was irrevocably lost. Song that quickly gives way to Peter's latest self-inflicted predicament. The story begins at a bowling alley. Peter throws a gutter ball, and his bowling ball doesn't return. He looks into the ball return mechanism, leading to a bizarre cutaway where his head peeks into a nuclear missile lab, startling scientist Judd Hirsch. Lois arrives, and Quagmire announces Mort Goldman is about to bowl a perfect game. Mort, despite throwing a gutter ball, is celebrated for a perfect game, inexplicably, amidst falling balloons and confetti. He then points off screen, claiming God is there, who is seen talking to a young woman, performing a levitating beer bottle trick, and asking her out. The episode then takes a dark turn with Quagmire. Lois walks into a public restroom, and from inside a stall, she looks up to see Quagmire peering down at her from the ceiling. A disembodied voice yells at her to use the bathroom, and Lois screams in terror. Quagmire is arrested, leading to a news report and a police lineup. Joe removes his handcuffs, and Peter, in a cutaway, expresses his love for a slice of blueberry pie before eating it. Back in the Griffin front yard, Peter, Cleveland, and Quagmire, carrying the halves of a red car, are confronted by angry Lois, Loretta Brown, and Bonnie Swanson. Peter defends Quagmire, leading to an extended, violent fight scene between Peter and the giant chicken. The fight spills into the street, causing multiple car crashes, explosions, and a school bus to swerve. They crash through a car windshield, fight on railroad tracks as a train approaches, and then on top of a moving, burning train. They fall off a cliff onto a cruise ship, crashing through the ceiling of its elegant dining hall, fighting onto the stage, through the floor, and into the engine room, where the chicken pulls a lever to full speed. The ship speeds up, crashes into the Quahog Pier, plows through city streets, an airport runway, and into a parked airliner. The chicken is sucked into a jet engine, which explodes into feathers. A battered Peter emerges from the wreckage at sunrise, covered in feathers. The chicken's dismembered leg on the tarmac slowly curls into a fist, promising future conflict. Peter, still in the front yard, finishes his sentence to the wives as if no time has passed, a testament to the show's non-linear comedic timing. Lois gives Quagmire a final warning. Meanwhile, Peter is still struggling with his lack of worth. He stands on the roof of the Drunken Clam, vows to do something memorable, slips, falls, and lands on actress Joan Cusack, stuffing her body into a mailbox in a panic. His friends, including Mort and Cleveland, have achieved their own moments of fame. Mort for his bowling, Joe for arresting a Crip cop, and Cleveland for being a fast-talking auctioneer. Peter feels left out. He finds his special talent when Horace the bartender points out Peter just ate a coin he left as a tip. Peter holds up a nickel between his fingers, realizing he can eat coins. The family, disgusted, watches Peter eat nickels in the car and at the dinner table, where his stomach jingles like Camptown races. Stewie, disgusted, talks about wasting money. That night, a sound of many coins pouring out is heard from Peter and Lois's bedroom. Here's the profound what if. What if Peter's blindness, induced by his insatiable coin-eating habit, had been truly permanent? The next morning, Peter wakes up in a panic, screaming, "Oh my God, Lois, I can't see!" At a healthcare center, A doctor confirms Peter has gone blind. He's seen wearing dark glasses and holding a white cane. This is the critical moment. Imagine the profound impact on the family if Peter were permanently blind. His clumsy, reckless nature, already a source of chaos, would be amplified by his inability to see. The family's life would be completely reoriented around Peter's disability. Lois would become his full-time caregiver, her own life and freedoms severely curtailed. Chris, Meg, and Stewie would have to constantly guide and protect their father, a reversal of traditional family roles. Peter's reliance on them would be absolute, fostering a new, perhaps unwelcome, level of dependence. The visual gags and physical comedy that are so central to Peter's character would be recontextualized, becoming darker, more poignant. The show itself would have to adapt, focusing on auditory humor and the challenges of navigating a sighted world without sight. It would transform from a show about a clueless father into a narrative about disability, adaptation, and the enduring bonds of family in the face of profound change. The episode shows Peter's immediate struggles. He trips over a footstool, falls face first, and Stewie laughs hysterically. That night, Peter, wearing sunglasses and briefs, enters Chris's room, mistaking him for Lois and getting into bed with him. The next day, he gets a seeing eye dog. Brian tries to be supportive, but Lois enters, unkempt and without makeup, admitting she's enjoyed not worrying about her appearance since Peter went blind, then becomes self-conscious. The resolution, however, brings Peter's sight back. Peter's seeing eye dog refuses to go into a burning drunken clam, so Peter ties the dog's leash to a homeless man. Blind Peter walks into the burning bar, sits at the counter, and asks Horace for a beer. A flaming beam pins Horace, who asks Peter for help. Peter grabs Horace's arm and, pulling, accidentally rips it off. Peter walks out of the burning bar, supporting the now one-armed Horace, hailed as a hero. A newspaper headline announces, "Hobo killed in dragging death, donates eyes to local hero." Peter can see again. He's celebrated at Quahog Town Hall, receiving a gold medal, in a direct parody of the final scene of Star Wars, A New Hope, complete with Chewbacca, C-3PO, and R2-D2. While Peter's blindness is temporary, the episode presents a powerful what-if scenario. Had he remained blind, the Griffins' lives would have been irrevocably altered, forcing them to confront the true meaning of support, adaptation, and the profound impact of losing a fundamental sense. The fleeting nature of his blindness in the show only highlights the dramatic shift that would have occurred if such a profound disability had become a permanent part of Peter's existence. Having explored the profound consequences of Peter's blindness, we now turn to a different kind of loss, one that would deeply impact Lois and the entire Griffin family. The chilling what if of Carter Pewterschmidt truly losing his fortune, plunging them into an unfamiliar realm of financial struggle. 9. Episode 3. An episode that makes us hypothesize a universe where Carter Pewterschmidt truly lost his fortune, plunging Lois and her family into an unfamiliar realm of financial struggle. The potential financial ruin that looms. The story opens at the lavish Pewterschmidt mansion. Lois and her mother, Barbara Babs Pewterschmidt, are drinking tea in the library. Peter walks in, oblivious to the opulence, mistaking a painting of a ship for a TV show called Old Ships. He then pulls out a photo album filled with old black and white photos of a young Babs and Carter, prompting Babs to reminisce about their courtship. A black and white flashback shows a young Babs and her friend on a beach. A young Carter Pewterschmidt, relaxing on a beach chair, is hit in the face by a beach ball, spilling his drink. He angrily yells at the women, then, in a shockingly violent act, punches Babs in the face, knocking her to the ground. This dark origin story for their relationship is quickly followed by a romantic scene of them lying on a bearskin rug and kissing. A montage shows Carter fighting in a snowy war against Alaskans, riding walruses, writing a letter by candlelight, and Babs listening to a reel-to-reel tape recorder. A new suitor, Reginald, attempts to court Babs with a proposal song, But Carter dramatically returns from the war, runs through a ballroom, punches Reginald, and passionately kisses Babs. Back in the present, Peter, unimpressed by the romantic tale, complains about being hungry and is sent by Lois to find Carter. Peter rows a small boat to Carter's large modern yacht, where he is shocked to find Carter in bed with a young Asian woman. Peter reacts with disgust, and Carter stammers out unconvincing excuses. Carter then threatens Peter, telling him to keep the affair a secret, even summoning a swarm of owls to attack a mocking seagull as a demonstration of his power. At dinner, Carter makes coded threats, and Peter nervously stuffs his face with food, then vomits it all over the table. Lois recalls Peter embarrassing her at dinner with Heather Mills, where Peter kicked off her prosthetic leg. Peter, Brian, Quagmire, and Joe are later at the Drunken Clam, where Peter tells them about Carter's affair. Quagmire, surprisingly, delivers a passionate speech about the sanctity of marriage, but then, along with Joe, suggests Peter blackmail Carter. Peter smiles, considering the idea. Peter blackmails Carter by nakedly entering his hot tub. Carter, distressed, agrees to Peter's demands. Peter then forces Carter to serve him, remove Ike's from Mike and Ike candies, and even go to France to deliver a message to the French people. Carter, looking tired, brings Peter a list of potential catchphrases, one of which Peter likes. The pivotal moment comes when Peter, despite Carter's protests, reveals Carter's affair to Babs in front of Lois. Carter drops his end of a large flat-screen TV, smashing it on the floor. Babs, shocked, starts to cry. Peter's new catchphrase falls flat. Carter, now divorced and disheveled, moves in with the Griffins. Peter and Brian offer awkward condolences, and Peter offers to help Carter get back into the dating scene. Carter, lamenting it's been 50 years since he was on a date, has a brief flashback to being with one of the girls from the movie Taken. Here's the profound what if. What if Carter, stripped of his wealth and status, had remained permanently impoverished and divorced? Imagine the profound shift in the Griffin family's life. Lois, who has always relied on her parents' immense fortune, would suddenly be cut off. Her lavish lifestyle, her access to private schools for the children, her ability to escape Peter's working-class reality would all vanish. The Griffins would be forced to confront true financial hardship, a reality they've largely been shielded from by Carter's bottomless pockets. Carter, without his money, would be a fish out of water. His arrogance and sense of entitlement, once supported by his wealth, would be exposed as hollow. He would be forced to live a middle-class existence, something completely foreign and likely unbearable to him. He might even become a permanent fixture in the Griffin household, a constant reminder of their lost privilege and a burden on their already strained finances. The dynamic between Peter and Carter would shift from one of Peter trying to get money to one of Peter supporting his former oppressor, a truly ironic reversal of fortune. The episode shows Carter's attempts to re-enter the dating scene, with Peter's help. They go to a trendy bar, where Peter gives Carter a list of pickup lines. Carter's attempts fail spectacularly, with women throwing drinks in his face. Carter, soaked and dejected, has a moment of realization and says he loves Babs. Peter insults Babs' appearance. Then a cutaway shows three women taking a selfie, their faces merging into one distorted face. Another cutaway shows Carter watching a PBS-style show explaining where fat girls come from. Peter then gives Carter a tattoo on his back, causing him to scream in pain. Peter is horrified to learn what happened to Jonathan Lipnicki, who appears horribly disfigured in the room. The episode culminates in Carter's attempt to win Babs back. Peter and Carter go to the mansion, where Babs is being courted by Reginald, who is singing to her. Carter bursts in and confronts Reginald. Peter defeats Reginald by yelling, "Penis!" which causes him to faint. Babs, still angry, tells Carter to leave. Carter is despondent, but Peter plays Surfin' Bird from a boombox. Say anything. Style. Carter, ignoring the music, gives a heartfelt apology to Babs, pleading for another chance. Babs, though hurt, agrees to take him back slowly. Carter, in a moment of shocking arrogance, rejects her offer, finding it too much work. Peter reminds Carter why they are there, and Carter changes his mind. He and Babs reconcile with a long, passionate kiss. While Carter ultimately regains his fortune and reconciles with Babs, the episode vividly explores the what-if of his financial ruin. Had he remained dispossessed, the entire world of Family Guy would have been irrevocably altered, forcing Lois to confront a life without privilege and the painful reality of financial struggle, a stark contrast to the comfortable, oblivious existence she often leads. It's a reminder that even the wealthiest characters are not immune to the harsh realities of a changing fortune. From the precarious financial state of Carter Pewterschmidt, we now return to the profound and emotional what-if surrounding Brian's death, contemplating the devastating possibility if Stewie's desperate efforts to resurrect him had ultimately failed, cementing a permanent void in the Griffin household. Our next emotional 12, Episode 8, an episode that makes us reflect on the devastating what-if, where Stewie's desperate efforts to resurrect Brian had. The episode opens the profound sadness and desperate hope that will define this narrative. The episode opens with the Griffin house, covered in snow and decorated for Christmas. The family is on the couch, watching a Home Alone parody where one of the robbers shoots the boy dead. Lois enters with Stewie, and Chris gets a nosebleed from excitement about the Christmas carnival. Peter, in a flashback, attempts to buy expensive gifts at Tiffany & Co., only to be revealed wearing paper towel wrappers as shoes. The family then goes to the Quahog Mall, which is undecorated and empty. Stewie, dressed as an elf, walks with Vinny, the new family dog. They find the carnival gone, and Stewie is upset. Vinny tries to cheer him up, advising him to bother the cologne salesman at Macy's. The family questions a security guard about the carnival's absence. Lois holds Stewie, who is disappointed, and Peter looks determined to fix things. Peter and Lois are in bed, and Lois reminisces about Stewie pranking Meg by replacing her salt shaker with a snake. Vinny explains that Carter Pewterschmidt canceled the carnival because he hates Christmas. Peter decides to talk to Carter, attempting to find his Christmas spirit through a parody of A Christmas Carol, with Peter as Santa trying to force-feed a boy gluten-free cookies. Peter confronts Carter in his office, demanding to know why he canceled the carnival. Carter states his hatred for Christmas, and Peter decides to help him find his Christmas spirit. Peter and Lois look out the window to see Stewie, disguised as Santa, on a neighbor's roof with a device, which then causes a massive explosion, turning the neighborhood into a fiery, post-apocalyptic wasteland. Stewie, wearing goggles, stands in the ruins. A parody of The Ghost of Christmas Past shows Carter complaining to Santa in his workshop. Peter attempts to write a Christmas letter, exaggerating the family's accomplishments, but Carter gets angry when Peter includes an embarrassing detail about him. Peter and Carter are in a hotel room, where Peter attempts to force-feed Carter eggnog while filming him. Peter, in a hallway, explains to a confused Carter that a different dog, the original Brian, walked by, and Carter is perplexed by Peter's implication that he is Jewish for hating Christmas. The Quahog Mall is finally decorated for Christmas, with a banner announcing Carter Pewterschmidt and Jesus present the Quahog Mall Christmas Carnival. Peter, Meg, and Chris are in line, and Peter points out Chinese carolers from A Christmas Story. Stewie sits on Santa's lap, deeply sad, and tells Santa all he wants for Christmas is his friend Brian back, who is dead. Stewie cries on Santa's lap, and Vinny looks on sadly. Here's the devastating what if. What if Stewie's desperate quest to bring Brian back had failed? What if there was no time machine, no past self to steal from, no way to reverse the tragedy? The episode, at this point, paints a picture of a permanent, inescapable void. Stewie's grief is palpable. His one wish for Christmas is the return of his best friend. If this wish remained unfulfilled, the very core of Stewie's being would be shattered. His genius, his ambition, his mischievous spirit, all would be overshadowed by an enduring sadness. The family, while grieving, has begun to adapt to life with Vinny. Vinny, now wearing glasses and a sweater, tries to cheer Stewie up by reading the newspaper, a nod to Brian's interests. He even presents his own version of Brian's book, Wish It, Want It, Do It, titled Wish It, Want It, You Blew It. Vinny offers to take Stewie to the mall to buy a present, and even gives a gift to mobsters, a toy train instead of a severed foot, leading to one of them getting shot. Stewie opens a bowling shirt from Vinny, who lists all the beach-related occasions it could be worn for, trying to integrate. But Stewie remains fixated on Brian. He walks through the toy store with Vinny, still sad. He sees his past self from another timeline, realizing his past self has the time machine return pad. Stewie devises a plan to steal the return pad from his past self, with Vinny acting as a distraction. Vinny distracts past Stewie by pretending to be a model scout, while present Stewie steals the return pad from his backpack. This is the moment of truth for our what if. Stewie and Vinny are in the back room of the toy store. Stewie explains that saving Brian means he and Vinny will never have met. They share a poignant goodbye, a testament to the bond they've formed. Stewie activates the time machine pad and disappears. What if the time machine had malfunctioned? What if past Stewie had resisted the theft? What if, despite all his efforts, Stewie couldn't change the past? Brian's death would be irreversible, and Stewie would be left with the crushing weight of that failure. The emotional impact would be immense, not just on Stewie, but on the entire family. The hope that fueled Stewie's quest would be extinguished, replaced by a permanent, profound sense of loss. The family would have to truly live without Brian, their new reality with Vinny becoming their unchanging normal. However, in the episode, Stewie successfully appears on the street just as the car is about to hit Brian. He pushes Brian out of the way, saving him, and the car hits the inflatable hockey net instead. Stewie hugs Brian, relieved, and explains he came from the future. As he does, he begins to fade away, his timeline being erased, and then fully disappears, along with the time machine pad. The time machine pad reappears in past Stewie's backpack, and past Stewie, who has no memory of the encounter with Vinny, looks confused. Brian and Stewie are then in front of their house, and Brian doesn't remember the events. Stewie, in a moment of playful frustration, hits Brian in the groin with a hockey stick. The episode ends with the Griffin family opening presents on Christmas morning. Brian gives Stewie a framed photo of the two of them with a plaque that says, "Friends Forever." They share a heartfelt moment, their bond restored. While the episode ultimately provides a happy ending, it powerfully explores the emotional weight of Brian's death and the desperate lengths Stewie would go to reverse it. The what if of Stewie's failure leaves a lingering sense of the profound, irreversible void that would have been left in the Griffin household, a poignant reminder of the irreplaceable nature of true friendship. The emotional journey of Stewie's desperate attempt to resurrect Brian leads us to a much darker and more sobering what if scenario, one that highlights the grim realities of abuse and the profound impact of intervention. Let's confront the chilling possibility if Quagmire had not intervened, leaving his sister Brenda trapped in an unending cycle of abuse. 10. Episode 3. An episode that makes us confront the dark, serious, and disturbing themes that are about to unfold. The story begins with Peter, Quagmire, and Joe at the Drunken Clam. Peter takes Quagmire down and lays him on the floor in a moment of unexplained chaos. The Griffin family arrives at the hospital waiting room, and a beat-up green car pulls into the parking lot. Brenda, Quagmire's sister, and her boyfriend Jeff get out and immediately begin to argue. The family, Brenda, and Jeff gather around Quagmire's hospital bed as a doctor gives them an update. Brenda sings a song to Quagmire, who slowly wakes up from his coma. Jeff gets angry at Brenda for waking Quagmire, yelling at her and pulling her out of the room. The scene shifts to Quagmire's house at night. Quagmire is on his couch, being helped by Lois and Peter. Brenda and Jeff are also there, and Jeff immediately starts yelling at Brenda. He then hits her, sending her flying out of the room. The sounds of their arguing and fighting continue off-screen, disturbing Peter and Lois in bed next door, and keeping Quagmire awake in his own bed. Quagmire eventually goes to the Griffin's front door, visibly tired, to discuss Brenda and Jeff's constant fighting. Here's the grim what if. What if Quagmire, paralyzed by fear or a misguided sense of loyalty, had not intervened? What if he had simply allowed Brenda to remain in her abusive relationship, trapped in an unending cycle of violence and despair? The episode paints a stark picture of Brenda's suffering, Jeff's physical abuse, his constant yelling, and Brenda's passive acceptance of her situation. If this cycle had continued unchecked, Brenda's life would have been one of perpetual torment, her spirit broken, and her potential unfulfilled. Imagine the long-term consequences. Brenda, pregnant with Jeff's child, would be raising a child in an abusive household, perpetuating a cycle of violence. The child would grow up witnessing their mother's suffering and their father's brutality, with potentially devastating psychological effects. Quagmire, Peter, and Joe would be forced to live with the knowledge of Brenda's suffering, their consciences burdened by their inaction. Lois, who attempts to reason with Brenda at the Harbor Cafe, would see her efforts fail, and Brenda would remain trapped. This what if is not just about Brenda. It's about the collective failure to protect a vulnerable individual, and the dark shadow it would cast over the lives of everyone involved. Lois confronts Brenda at the Harbor Cafe, where Brenda removes her large sunglasses, revealing a severe black eye. Lois tries to reason with Brenda about her abusive relationship, but Brenda is resistant. Peter, Quagmire, and Joe are at the Drunken Clam, discussing Jeff's abuse. Joe explains that he can't arrest Jeff without a formal complaint from Brenda, suggesting an intervention instead. The Griffin family, Joe, and Bonnie gather in Quagmire's living room for an intervention. Brenda enters surprised. Joe explains it's an intervention, and Quagmire reads a heartfelt letter to his sister, moving her to tears. Brenda hugs Quagmire, and everyone smiles at the touching moment. However, Jeff enters the room and angrily tells Brenda to leave with him. In a shocking twist, Brenda announces that she and Jeff are getting married, and that she is pregnant. Later, Peter, Joe, and Quagmire are in the Griffin's basement playing poker when they are interrupted by the sound of Jeff beating Brenda again. They look out the window and see the silhouettes of Jeff hitting Brenda. This is the moment when Quagmire, having witnessed the abuse firsthand, decides he cannot stand by any longer. The three men decide to take matters into their own hands and kill Jeff. They lure Jeff into the woods for a midnight hunting trip, but Jeff turns on them, revealing he knew it was a trap, and knocks out Peter and Joe. Quagmire and Jeff engage in a vicious fight in the woods. Quagmire, badly beaten, runs to his car, drives it, and runs over Jeff, killing him. The next day, Brenda is crying in Quagmire's living room. Quagmire, Peter, and Joe, all bruised and scratched, enter. Peter gives Brenda a forged letter from Jeff, claiming he has left her. Brenda reads the letter, filled with insults, but ultimately cries with relief that Jeff is gone for good. While the episode ends with Jeff's death and Brenda's liberation, the harrowing journey to that point powerfully illustrates the what-if of inaction. Had Quagmire not intervened, Brenda's life would have been a continuous nightmare, a tragic testament to the devastating impact of domestic abuse and the silence that often surrounds it. The extreme measures taken by the friends, though morally ambiguous, highlight the profound stakes when one's loved ones are trapped in such a cycle, and the desperate lengths some might go to break it. From the profound emotional stakes of Brian's potential resurrection, we now turn to a truly somber and heartbreaking what-if scenario. A timeline where Lois succumbed to cancer, a tragic outcome stemming from Peter's thoughtless actions. 5. Episode 7. An episode that makes us somberly explore the dark and emotional narrative that is about to unfold. The story opens with news anchors Tom Tucker and Diane Simmons reporting on the lovable child actress, Olivia Fuller, from the Performing Arts School. Stewie, recognizing Olivia from the Tasty Juice ads, is disgusted by her success. Tom Tucker announces that Tasty Juice is dropping Olivia as their spokesperson, replacing her with Chuck Berry, much to Stewie's delight. However, Diane Simmons also announces that Olivia will be appearing at the Quahog Mall for the grand opening of a kids' clothing store, prompting Stewie to declare his intention to heckle her roundly, even comparing it to Luke Skywalker humiliating a rebel pilot. Meanwhile, Peter and Lois are at a movie theater watching a chick flick called Autumn's Piano. Peter complains, having been forced to attend after embarrassing Lois in front of Sandra Oh by offering her $1 for her movies and thinking about her during sex. Peter cries loudly during the movie, claiming it helped him understand things, like sarcasm, through a cutaway gag featuring a man named Fuad. At the Quahog Mall, Stewie and Brian watch Olivia. Stewie, initially planning to humiliate her, is stunned by how fantastic she looks. He approaches her, and they awkwardly reminisce. Stewie invites her to his Bernie Mac night, but Olivia rejects him, stating she's dating more sophisticated men since moving to Hollywood. Stewie is heartbroken. Brian, witnessing this, questions Stewie's disappointment, reminding him he came to gloat. Stewie, however, is fixated on Olivia's newfound maturity, believing he needs to be more grown up. Here's where the dark what if begins to subtly emerge, intertwined with Peter's absurd actions. Peter, influenced by the chick flicks, decides to make his own, titled Steel Vaginas. He announces the first day of shooting in a hospital room, explaining that the heroine, Vagina Hurts, is told she has uncurable chick cancer. He forces Joe, who is genuinely handicapped, to stand out of his wheelchair and uses Chris with a cattle prod to make it look like Joe is talking with peanut butter. Imagine a timeline where this fictional chick cancer becomes a horrifying reality for Lois. What if Peter's absurd, insensitive portrayal of a serious illness had a chilling echo in their own lives? The episode, through Peter's movie, foreshadows a potential tragedy. If Lois were to contract cancer, the entire family dynamic would shift from their usual comedic chaos to a somber struggle for survival. Peter's cluelessness would be replaced by genuine fear and helplessness, or perhaps a tragically inadequate attempt to cope. Lois, the anchor of the family, would be fighting for her life, and the children would be forced to confront the harsh reality of their mother's mortality. The movie premiere for Steel Vaginas is a disaster. The audience boos and walks out, with Quagmire calling it the worst piece of crap I've ever seen, and Joe complaining his ass is actually sore. The film, as described by Peter's narration, is a grotesque and misogynistic mess, depicting a woman giving birth to an adult woman covered in SpaghettiOs, a woman drowning, and ultimately dying from a rotten vagina. This fictional, cruel portrayal of women and illness, even in its comedic exaggeration, sets a disturbing tone for the episode's underlying what if. Stewie, meanwhile, is still struggling with Olivia. Brian, in a moment of genuine empathy, gives Stewie a heartfelt speech about adulthood and responsibility, convincing him to stick with the relationship. Stewie and Olivia play house in a cardboard box, but their pretend marriage is sexless, and Stewie complains about the Play-Doh spaghetti. He accuses Olivia of changing the subject when he brings up their lack of intimacy, asking if she even knows what sex is. This leads to Stewie throwing Rupert down and walking away in anger, his cardboard house catching fire, as he laughs maniacally. Idea for a farce. Cheating wife and Papa's ass burned alive. Stewie and Olivia join Brian and Jillian on a date at a restaurant. Their arguments escalate, with Olivia criticizing Stewie for acting like a baby, and Stewie, in turn, provoking a man at another table. The date ends in disaster, and Stewie and Olivia's relationship quickly deteriorates. Olivia is seen with another boy, Victor, in the cardboard house. Stewie confronts her, accusing her of cheating. Olivia retorts that he wanted the relationship to end, and Stewie throws Rupert down and walks away, the cardboard house catching fire. The episode, while primarily focusing on Stewie's relationship and Peter's movie, subtly creates a chilling parallel. Peter's flippant attitude towards a serious illness, as depicted in his film, combined with his general disregard for Lois's feelings throughout the series, creates a disturbing context for our what if. What if Lois, after years of Peter's thoughtlessness and neglect, had indeed faced a life-threatening illness, mirroring the fictional chick cancer that Peter so cruelly parodied? The tragedy would be magnified by the irony, a grim consequence of Peter's inability to take anything seriously. The show, usually lighthearted, would become a profound and somber exploration of mortality, regret, and the fragility of life. The very humor of Family Guy would be stripped away, leaving only the raw, emotional truth of a family grappling with an unimaginable loss. The harrowing thought of Brenda's unending abuse now gives way to a chilling, philosophical what-if scenario, one that questions the very nature of reality and power. The terrifying possibility where Stewie's simulated world domination became a chilling reality, with him as the undisputed ruler. 6. Episode 5. An episode that makes us dissect the terrifying what if. The episode opens with a news report from Tom Tucker and Ollie Williams, setting a mundane backdrop before plunging into Stewie's dark ambitions. The familiar Family Guy intro, with its cheerful song and dance, offers a stark contrast to the disturbing events that are supposedly about to unfold. The story opens in a courtroom where Peter and Lois embrace. Lois tries to tell Peter that Stewie tried to kill her, but Peter dismisses her. Lois insists Stewie is evil, recalling flashbacks of him shooting her on a cruise ship, her falling into the ocean, and being rescued by a reverse merman, fish top, human bottom. Lois, suffering from amnesia, wanders aimlessly, ending up at a summer camp where she tries to stop overweight children from eating each other. She then meets a young man named Derek, who takes her to a white supremacist meeting. At the meeting, someone punches Lois, and the impact restores her memory. Back in the courtroom, Lois finishes her story, and Joe Swanson realizes Stewie is a homicidal baby. Chris points out that Stewie has vanished. Joe and Peter vow to catch Stewie. Joe, Cleveland, and another officer question a man at his house, and then Superman's housekeeper, Consuela, showing them a wanted poster of Stewie. The Griffin family returns home to find Stewie waiting with a gun. Stewie holds the family hostage and forces Peter to admire his macaroni art of an owl, then ties them up on the couch. He forces Brian at gunpoint to insult Joe, then to take back the compliment, causing Joe to leave disappointed. Stewie then orders Lois to breastfeed him and makes Brian taste the milk first. Chris offers to do it instead. Cleveland Brown opens the door and is immediately shot by Stewie, falling to the ground. Peter hugs a crying Lois, telling her Cleveland is now in heaven, where he is seen arguing with St. Peter at the pearly gates. Stewie takes Brian hostage, dragging Cleveland's body, and drives away in a Toyota Prius, insulting Joe again. Stewie, pointing a gun at Brian, talks about his plan for world domination and has a flashback to his failed American Idol audition, where Simon Cowell harshly criticizes him. The Griffin family, still tied up, decides to start a rumor about Rob Schneider, revealing they were never tied in the first place, much to Chris's obliviousness. Brian and Stewie are driving when Stewie's gun accidentally discharges, causing Brian to swerve and crash the car. The Griffin family, searching Stewie's room for clues, discovers a hidden door to a large armory. Peter marvels at the weapons and accidentally activates a device that switches his and Lois's minds. Stewie and Brian drive to the CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. Stewie, on a laptop, forces Brian to choose an alias for their mission, and Brian picks Willem Dafoe, leading to a cutaway of Dafoe hiding under Stewie's bed. Dressed in suits, Stewie and Brian sneak through the CIA building, entering a massive server room. Stewie explains his plan to take over the world's power grid, shoots open a control panel, and begins hacking a computer terminal. A Clippy-like paperclip assistant pops up, annoying Stewie. CIA agents, including Stan Smith and Avery Bullock from American Dad, break down the door. Stewie successfully gains access, and lights flicker off across the globe, including at Tom Cruise's house, where Katie Holmes is freed from a force field. Stan Smith and Avery Bullock hold Stewie and Brian at gunpoint, but Stewie counters by holding them at gunpoint as well. Here's the terrifying what if. What if this entire sequence of events, culminating in Stewie becoming the new president of the world, had not been a simulation? What if Stewie's plan for global domination, detailed in all its brutal efficiency, had truly come to pass? Imagine a world where a megalomaniacal infant with a genius-level intellect and no moral compass held absolute power. Stewie, from the Oval Office with Brian present, announces his new laws. Anyone who sees Peter Griffin must throw apples at him, and more bizarre decrees. This would be a world reshaped by Stewie's whims, a totalitarian regime run by a baby. Freedoms would be curtailed, absurd laws would be enforced, and the world would live under the constant threat of Stewie's capricious temper. The show's comedic elements would be twisted into a dark satire of authoritarianism, with the once familiar Quahog becoming a dystopian landscape. The what if of Stewie's real-world domination is a chilling thought experiment in absolute power and its potential for chaos and oppression. The episode, however, reveals the truth. Lois, dressed in commando gear, crashes through the Oval Office window, and an intense, action movie-style fight breaks out between Lois and Stewie, destroying the Oval Office. Peter walks into the burning, destroyed office, finds Lois and Stewie seemingly dead, and shoots Stewie's body, delivering a one-liner, then holds Lois's body before putting his foot on Stewie's head in a victory pose. The scene freezes, and the words, "Simulation over," appear in large green text. The scene pulls back to show Stewie in his room, sitting in a VR simulation chair and removing the headset. Brian enters, and Stewie explains he was running a simulation to see how his plan to kill Lois and take over the world would play out. They discuss the meta implications of the episode being a simulation, referencing The Sopranos. While it was all a simulation, the episode's detailed depiction of Stewie's power grab makes the what if feel incredibly real. It forces us to confront the dark potential of Stewie's intellect and the profound, terrifying consequences if his grand, murderous ambitions were ever truly unleashed upon the world, turning the comedic infant into a truly chilling dictator. From the chilling thought of Stewie's simulated world domination, we now turn to a more personal and uplifting what-if scenario, one that offers a glimmer of hope for Chris Griffin. Let's ponder a reality where Chris, freed from Quahog's influence, found genuine success and acceptance in a prestigious private school environment. Our penultimate 5, Episode 11, an episode that makes us familiar, start to an episode that delves into Chris's often overlooked potential. The story begins with Peter, Joe, Quagmire, and Stewie playing golf. Cleveland, comically disguised in a Richard Nixon mask, is also on the course. Stewie, strapped to Peter, complains about the heat. Peter and Joe argue, and Quagmire gets angry after missing his shot, leading to Joe hitting him with a golf club. Meanwhile, Chris rides his bike down the street, stopping to talk to his elderly, perverted neighbor, Herbert. Another paperboy, Kyle, appears, insults Chris, and Herbert leaves with Kyle, clearly favoring the new boy. Chris, having lost his paper route to Kyle, explains his predicament to Peter, who reminisces about his ancestor boxing a kangaroo. Brian finds Stewie sunbathing, and Stewie, drinking a tab soda, looks tanned. Chris tries to get Herbert to be his customer again, but Herbert distracts him with a fake phone call and then leaves with Kyle, who pushes Chris to the ground. Herbert offers both boys pills, a truly disturbing moment. Chris comes home beaten up, prompting Peter's anger. Peter, recalling his own experiences with bullies, who pantsed him in class, in the hallway, and in the bathroom, decides to talk to Kyle's parents. Peter eats cereal with a fake Tony the Tiger. Lois and Meg are reading, while Stewie, in a toy car, has a pencil mustache that Lois tries to wipe off. Stewie, at dinner with Martin Landau, has food spat on him. He then hosts a party in the backyard, showing Brian his tan walk and talking to a man named Devin. Peter goes to Kyle's house, comparing Chris and Kyle's arguing to an old guy and a midget. Peter and Kyle argue, and Peter eventually beats up Kyle, then jumps out of the window. Peter, still in a tree with his penis hanging out, argues with Lois, leading to a bizarre abortion flashback. Brian finds Stewie in a tanning bed, who asks to be woken in 15 minutes. 6 hours later, Brian wakes up to find Stewie bright red, covered in lotion, struggling to stand and walk, and eventually collapsing. Brian and Mr. Furley find Stewie, who is now peeling his skin off, declaring his tanning days over. They then discover a mole on Stewie's stomach, and Brian suggests it might be the C word, which Stewie initially misunderstands as a bad word, before they both freak out, fearing cancer. Meanwhile, Peter and Lois are at Kyle's house. Peter apologizes to Kyle for beating him up. Kyle's mom tells him to show Peter his Legos. Peter gets excited about the Legos, arguing with Lois about Mega Blocks, and then plays with Kyle, telling him he's not good at building things. This is where Peter, instead of being a good role model, realizes that bullying is fun. He throws hot eggs on Lois, makes her punch herself, and slaps Stewie, embracing his new identity as a bully. Chris, however, has a moment of defiance. Peter, still bullying Chris, hits him on the head. Chris asks Peter why he is bullying him, and Peter explains he is now a bully, not a nerd. Peter chases Meg around the kitchen table. Brian reads at the kitchen table as Stewie, fearing cancer, comes in with a list of things to do before he dies. They visit the Chicago Museum of Art, looking at A Sunday Afternoon on the island of La Grande Jatte. They go to a dance studio where Stewie tells Brian he loves him, then says olive juice instead. Stewie also appears in a commercial for chronic pain. Brian reads from Stewie's notepad. Peter and Chris are in the car. Peter, wearing a sweatshirt backward and spitting out a candy bar, calls Randy Fulcher, an insurance agent with MS, a nerd. Peter gets angry, but Chris stops him from punching Randy, and punches Peter instead. Chris explains he is standing up to Peter, who has a moment of clarity. Peter, however, is still a bully, but promises not to bully anyone again, then tells Chris to outrun his sister. Here's the transformative what if. What if Chris, after his act of defiance, had been offered a scholarship or an opportunity to attend a prestigious private school, completely removed from the dysfunctional environment of Quahog and his bullying father? Imagine Chris thriving in an environment that nurtured his gentle nature and artistic inclinations, rather than constantly belittling him. He might discover hidden talents, excel academically, and develop a strong sense of self-worth, far away from the shadows of his family. In this alternate reality, Chris could become a successful, confident individual, perhaps even pursuing a career in art or music, fields where his sensitivity would be an asset. He would no longer be the butt of every joke, nor would he be constantly overshadowed by Peter's antics or Meg's struggles. His social anxiety might dissipate, replaced by genuine friendships and acceptance. The show would lose its most innocent and often abused character, forcing the narrative to confront the absence of his unique vulnerability. The what if of Chris's escape to a private school is a poignant contemplation on the power of environment and the potential for growth when freed from stifling circumstances. The episode concludes with the resolution of Stewie's cancer scare. Brian points out a mole on Stewie's stomach. They freak out, fearing the C word, and go to the hospital. Stewie talks about Jim Henson, leading to a cutaway of the Swedish chef and Kermit the Frog. The doctor confirms the mole is benign, and Stewie is relieved. While Chris ultimately remains in Quahog, this episode, through his struggles and brief act of defiance, makes us genuinely wonder about the untapped potential within him. The what if of Chris finding success and acceptance in a private school environment offers a hopeful, albeit unfulfilled, vision of a different path for the often maligned Griffin son, a path where he could finally flourish beyond the confines of his chaotic family. From the hopeful possibility of Chris finding success away from Quahog, we now arrive at our final what-if scenario, one that profoundly impacts Stewie's meticulously planned existence. Imagining the chaotic and profound implications for Stewie and the family if his mission to prevent a new sibling had failed, introducing a new baby Griffin. Our final two, Episode 11, an episode that makes us imagine. The episode's opening credits are absent from the provided transcript, but the core narrative quickly plunges into Peter's birthday celebration at Bob's Funland and Putt-Putt Golf. The story begins with Peter's birthday party. The family is at Bob's Funland, a putt-putt golf. Lois reveals she's pregnant, much to Peter's shock and initial excitement. However, Peter, ever the immature one, quickly reverts to his typical self, complaining about the implications of a new baby. Here's the profound what if. What if Lois's pregnancy had gone to term and a new baby Griffin had joined the chaotic household? This is the central conflict for Stewie, whose meticulously planned life and dominance are threatened by the arrival of a new, potentially rival infant. Imagine the profound implications. Stewie's reaction is immediate and extreme. He believes the new baby will steal his parents' attention and, more importantly, disrupt his plans for world domination. His elaborate schemes and advanced intelligence are usually focused on global conquest or Lois's demise, but the threat of a sibling turns his genius inward, towards a personal, existential crisis. The arrival of a new baby would mean less attention for Stewie, less resources for his inventions, and a constant, annoying presence he would likely view as an inferior competitor. The episode shows Stewie's desperate attempts to prevent the baby's birth. He attempts to perform an abortion on Lois using various methods, including a coat hanger, which he uses to get a golf ball out of a hole, a vacuum cleaner, and even a miniature wrecking ball. He tries to convince Lois to get an abortion, even going so far as to sing a pro-abortion song. This dark humor highlights the extreme lengths Stewie is willing to go to maintain his status quo. If Stewie had failed and a new baby arrived, the dynamics of the Griffin family would be forever altered. Stewie, instead of being the sole infant genius, would have to contend with a new presence, potentially leading to a lifelong rivalry, or perhaps a grudging acceptance and even mentorship of a younger, less intelligent sibling. Lois and Peter, already struggling with 3 children, would be even more overwhelmed, their finances further stretched. Chris and Meg, already low on the totem pole, would find themselves even more overlooked, potentially exacerbating their insecurities. The comedic chaos of the Griffin household would reach new, unprecedented levels, with a new personality adding to the already volatile mix. Stewie's quest takes him to New York City, where he believes Lois is going to get an abortion. A montage shows him navigating the city, visiting landmarks like the Plaza and the Museum of Modern Art. He even sees a sign for Radio City Music Hall, featuring Griffin Meg Griffin, a bizarre glimpse into Meg's potential future fame. Stewie eventually confronts Lois at the hospital, where he attempts a musical number to convince her to get an abortion. He then tries to kill the baby with a syringe. However, Lois reveals she was never actually pregnant, having merely eaten a large amount of Chinese food. The entire ordeal was a misunderstanding, a testament to Peter's obliviousness and Stewie's overactive imagination. Stewie, relieved, then accidentally, shoots Lois with a tranquilizer dart after she makes a comment about his Calvins. While the pregnancy was a false alarm, the episode powerfully explores the what if of a new baby Griffin. Stewie's extreme reaction, his elaborate schemes, and his profound fear of being replaced paint a vivid picture of the chaos and psychological turmoil that would have ensued. Had his mission failed, the Griffin family would have been plunged into a new era of sibling rivalry, domestic chaos, and a constant battle for attention, forever changing the fabric of their already dysfunctional lives. The episode, in its very premise, is a masterclass in exploring the profound implications of a seemingly simple addition to the family. Conclusion. As we drift deeper into the quiet night, reflecting on these what-if theories, it becomes clear just how precariously balanced the Family Guy universe truly is. We've journeyed through timelines where Brian was permanently lost, where Peter was a tribal chief, and where Lois almost left it all behind. We've seen the chilling potential of Stewie's ambitions for world domination and the profound impact if his efforts to save Brian had failed. These alternate realities, though fleeting, leave us with unsettling questions about fate, choice, and the fragile threads that hold our favorite characters, and perhaps even our own lives together. Think about it. How many small choices, how many unexpected turns, could completely redefine everything we know? Let these thoughts gently guide you to a peaceful rest, as the endless possibilities of the multiverse spin quietly in the darkness. As we close our eyes, let's ponder the fleeting glimpses of alternate Quahogs, where Brian's absence was final, Stewie's world domination was real, and the very fabric of the Griffin family was forever changed. These what-if scenarios remind us how fragile their reality, and perhaps our own, truly is.